I got to set the scene here. I'm FaceTiming with Brad Geiger, and I'm FaceTiming from my backyard on my phone, and he's FaceTiming from his beautiful porch on his Philadelphia home. And Brad, it's best described as a row house or a townhouse, or what are they best described as?
It's a row house, which means it's basically connected to the whole block of houses. They're all connected at the wall, basically. So it's one after another, after another, after another. We all share a wall with our neighbor on either side.
Right. And your front porch, I'm guessing, is about, 8 to 10 feet above street level?
Yep, okay. It is.
Okay. So we're FaceTiming and having a good old conversation, and all of a sudden in the background, Brad, I hear the sound of ding 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 ding, and it's the ice cream man coming down the street on Brad's street. And I mean, maybe it's better. What was my reaction so that you can tell the world what?
The absolute unbounded joy that Dave's face and voice took on was really something to see. My wife was sitting there and she was losing it, because it's like, you've got an ice cream man, you've got a real ice cream man, he comes down the street with ice cream, and I'm like, yeah, he does this every day about this time. You know?
So I've lived in my house, Brad, for 5 years now, and I think it was by accident, we had an ice cream man come down the street, and I got so excited, bounding out of the house. So as I hear this music in the background, I go, Brad, do you have Venmo? And he's like, Venmo? Yeah. No, why would I have Venmo? I was like, because I want to pay you to go get an ice cream right now.
And I'm like, pay me? You don't have to pay me to do anything. I'm going to get some ice cream. So I went down there, and it's the same guy who's been working our neighborhood for years, right? And I was telling Dave later, I was down there a few days ago getting ice cream, and I was getting ice cream for myself and the boys. I know I knew what they wanted, so I just shouted up, hey, I'm going to grab some ice cream. Somebody come out and help me carry this stuff in. So I go up and made the order, and my younger son, Max, comes bounding down the stairs, and this ice cream man just grabbed his heart. He says, I remember when that guy was just up to your knees. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's great, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing. And he goes, and one of these days, he's going to come out, and then his kids are going to come out after him. And I said, that's it. No more for you. You know, but this guy has been coming down the street for years, even back when Carolyn remembers. There's a park 2 blocks away from the house, and I gotta say, we've been pretty lucky. Our kids were never the throwing tantrums type.
Right.
I can count on one hand the number of tantrums we've had to deal with. And but this was one of the times, and she was literally dragging Alex home by the scruff of his neck, right? And he was screaming to high heaven the entire time. The ice cream truck saw this going on, pulled up behind her, and slowly drove behind her every step of the way. Like, you know what? Ice cream would fix this problem. The doodly doodly doo dee doo dee doo dee doo dee doo. And Carolyn's like, there's no way I can reward this behavior with ice cream. I'm not doing it. He followed her all the way home.
Desperate for a sale. You know what's funny, though, as far as a social pack, is how we all sort of tolerate the fact that there's this truck. Like, I don't know about your city. My city has sort of anti-honking laws. Like, if you're honking, you got to have a reason to be honking, you know?
Right.
Because they don't want it to turn into, like, I don't know, Bangalore, where everyone's honking as they drive down the street constantly.
Right.
Or Tijuana. God, if you ever drive Tijuana, it's nonstop honking. And yet, as a culture, we've all quietly agreed, like, oh, no, this is fine. It's absolutely fine that this man is blasting this terrible circus music as he drives down the street, because there's ice cream at the end of it, you know?
Yeah, and if you've heard it once, it's in your head for the rest of the day. You've got that earworm with you for the next 24 hours until he comes back down the street again.
But do you think it's the social pack is allowed to be broken because it's ice cream? Like, if it was like, the canned beet man is here. Everyone loves canned beets. Oh, look, Mom, Dad, grab some money. The canned beat man. Like I wouldn't stand for music for the canned beat man.
No, in fact, if I was the canned beat man, I'd want to be as quiet as possible. I wouldn't want somebody to be able to draw a bead on me.
It's true. It's true. Oh my God, the idea of a canned beat man. I don't know why that got me. But anyway, so the long story short for everyone at home, Brad let me live vicariously. He kept his FaceTime going. He got this soft serve from, what was it called? Mr. What was it?
Mr. Softy.
Mr. Softy. Well, he should see a doctor about that. But Mr. Softy was the ice cream brand. And then he dipped it in chocolate, which I've never seen before. Anyway.
Seriously?
I'm not kidding. I was very excited about this whole process that Brad got to experience.
I actually researched this. It's coconut oil that they add to the chocolate, and so it makes it harden into a brittle little candy shell. So it's a soft serve vanilla. He dips it into this chocolate syrup that has had the coconut oil added to it. As soon as it hits the air, it hardens, and then you've got this. And I'm a texture guy. Half the foods that I like or don't like, not necessarily it's the taste, it's the texture, and it's got this brittle chocolate shell on the outside and soft serve on the inside, and it's a little taste of heaven.
Well, I got to tell you, watching you get an ice cream on FaceTime was a little taste of heaven. And I'll say for everybody else that you've got a taste of heaven, because hello, everyone, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about a little taste of heaven and making comics.
That was one of the best intro transitions I've ever heard. That was amazing.
Brad throwing shade on 5 years of my intros. No.
I didn't say anything about the previous ones, but that was a particularly good one. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of Evil Inc. and the editor of webcomics.com.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive in Sheldon and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
I got so flustered I forgot my intro. And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have a whole big, long gamut of stuff to talk about today as we head out tonight to go to New Jersey for the Reuben Awards, which is very exciting. And so hopefully we'll see if there's some listeners that are in the NCS, the National Cartoonist Society. We will see you there this week. But in the meantime, we've got a whole long list of questions. I'm going to jump us right in for our first question. Comes in from Don Kelly over at patreon.com/comiclab. And it says, "Hey, Brad, I've had various starts and stops with making comic strips over the years. For various reasons, I stopped or put them on hold, always with the intent of going back to them. I'm now going to be 55 years old this month. Is it too late to make a serious go at being a real cartoonist, or have I missed the boat? I don't think I have, but hearing what you guys think would mean a lot. Thanks for the show. All the best, Don." So, Brad, I turned it over to my favorite guy in his mid-50s. What do you think about...
How many mid-50s guys do you know? How much of a competition was this? Let's get that out of the way right off the bat.
I have a plethora of mid-50s friends to choose from, but I'm turning this over to my favorite mid-50s friend. No, but in all seriousness, because... I lead with that because it's good to note that Brad and I are not far off from this age. So it actually, we can speak from the heart on this one. And Brad, I think, why don't you jump in first?
I'll just start with the headline. No, it's not too late. But going even further, there's a reason that I pitched this as an opening topic to Dave and when we started the show. And that's because I was listening back to episode 299, and it's the wisdom of small mistakes. And we talked an awful lot about the importance of starting early and learning self-publishing early, learning these things when the stakes are low, because then you can build things up when the stakes are higher. And there was some nuance to that I'm not sure we hit hard enough that this is an excellent opportunity to do now. And that is this. That's not to say that you have to be young to start comics and you have to be young to start self-publishing. The main thing that we were talking about there is that spending an entire career in publishing and then getting to a certain point and then realizing that what has happened to creators for 120 years of comics history is now happening to you. Right. It's a story that we've seen over and over and over again, either in new editor comes in and doesn't like you, or you're not the house style anymore, or maybe you're just too expensive and hiring somebody who's not as good but younger and trainable, or somebody they can mold and cheaper, right? There's a whole plethora of reasons that it happens, and that's what we were kind of warning about. But that does not mean that you can't start at this when you're in your advanced years, we shall say. If you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, it doesn't mean it's too late for you. However, I do think that it means that you've got to go into this with your eyes open.
Yeah, I will agree with Brad. The headline for me is no, it is not too late. And in fact, I would say, for those that are listening, it's not too late when you're 65. It's not too late when you're 75. It really is. It's, for one thing, it's not a high impact sport. It's not like we're out here, we're playing the scrum in rugby or anything here. It's we're sitting at a desk and we're drawing. I will say, 55 versus 25-year-old me, I'm far more aware of my posture and the breaks that I need to take, because I went a little too hard, joking aside in terms of exercise and stuff like that. I went a little too hard in my 20s in terms of working for a solid 6 hours and not taking a break and getting repetitive strain injuries. So I will say, as a fellow 55-year-old, you're probably going to know you got to take it easy. But I will say this, there are benefits to starting at 55 that you wouldn't have had at 25. You have a better sense of self. You know who you are. You know what you want to communicate. You're not going to put on false airs either in who you are or probably in the storytelling or joke crafting or character creation that you make. In the sense that sometimes when you're 25 and you're not quite sure of the world and your place in it, you create characters and stories and arcs that maybe are a little artificial to who you are. And I don't think that will happen at 55. So that's good news. Second of all, I think you are more, I will say in general, I can't speak for you, but in general, a 55-year-old has a better sense of work-life balance and of balance in general in terms of how to approach an art career. So the ups and the downs that might really throw a 22-year-old, 25-year-old sideways, for a 55-year-old, you'll take it on the chin and be like, all right, well, this is a moment to grow, or this is a learning moment, and this is what it is, and keep going. So I think in some respects, there are even advantages to someone starting later in life.
Absolutely. Having said that, the other side of the coin still is there. This is still going to take a long time to build.
Yes.
Well, all those things that we say on the show about this being a marathon, not a sprint, and that building a career in comics takes an awful long time. There are no shortcuts. There's no magic wand. It's going to take you a long time to find an audience, to build your audience, and to grow that audience to a place where it's a sustainable thing. All of those things are still true. So I can't BS you about that. This is still a slow growth thing and always has been. However, I will say, on your side, you've got all those things that Dave said. Plus, I think, you've said that you started a comic and you stopped it, and you started one and you stopped it. And so my sense of you from those introductory sentences is that you've always been kind of drawing, even if not, it wasn't comic strips. You've always been maybe doodling or maybe sketching or drawing, and you've also been doing whatever else you've been doing for the last 55 years, right? All of that stuff has produced somebody that has a certain amount of...
I don't know why that made me laugh. It was sort of like, who knows what else you've been up to at 55? What is this nonsense you filled your life with? Who could say?
Maybe you were a software engineer. Maybe you were a high school teacher. Maybe you were a chef. Whatever it was that you did is now going to inform this new thing that you're going to do. That's what I mean.
That's a really good point. Yes.
Yeah. And so you get to bring that and all your seasoned self to this. And I think myself that that's an advantage. I think young people have all the advantage in energy and none of the advantage usually. There's a few standouts, but none of the advantage in skill, right? Yeah. Whereas you have had a chance now to kind of become seasoned, and you're not going to have the energy, but you're going to have that ability to see things in a way that maybe a 20-something can't. And that's an advantage in and of itself.
Yeah, and I will say, much like Brad, I also honed in on the idea that you have started and stopped and started and stopped and never finished a couple projects. And so I want to offer this advice, friend to friend, in that I think this time, set yourself up to get a little bit farther. Set yourself up for success and create and start a project that is finishable. Is it 10 pages? Is it 15 pages? Is it 30 comic strips before you gather it together in a little print that you can pass around to friends and family? Make it something so that when you get to the finish line, whatever that finish line is for you, because you're going to make it a manageable goal. Because here's what it is. You need to feel the success in finishing something, handing it to someone, giving it to someone, sharing it with someone. That will give you the energy to keep going. The feedback is sometimes a critical part of the psychological process of continuing to create. It might not necessarily be helpful to you, but I'm just suggesting that might be something you want to incorporate into this upcoming project.
Absolutely. And we wish you all the best as you go. I personally can't wait to see what you produce, and I hope you get a chance to show us at some point in the Comic Lab Discord server. Now,
let me jump us into our next question, Bradley. And this comes in from Redan over at patreon.com/comiclab. And Redan writes, "Hi, Brad and Dave. I was wondering how you battle procrastination. We all do it to some extent or other. A link to click, a post to read, and suddenly you've spent half an hour on some page or other while you wanted to work. Do you have any tips? Also, because I'm curious, what's your procrastination rate, minutes to hour?"
Well, listen, I don't know what my actual procrastination rate is, although I would imagine if I actually counted it, it would be way higher than I would find acceptable, because this is something that I think we all start with, especially if you're a creative person. It's really hard to sit down and just start doing your stuff, right? First, you got to open your email and see that, if you're like me, nobody's emailed you. And then you've got to open your social media and see that nobody's commenting on your social media. And then you got to go searching for somebody who cares that you're out there.
Oh, please, God, I exist. Someone laugh. Someone, you're doing the Jeb Bush, please clap. God, somebody do something. Yeah.
That's 25 minutes right there out of my day, But yeah, you start out slowly going on, and it can be especially social media. And doing things like planning social media posts and keeping up with social media and stuff like that, it can be really, really difficult to stay on point. Procrastination is an absolute bear of something to try to battle. Yeah. I think the only way that I have found to combat procrastination is a deadline.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. And sometimes I will say this, is that if it's a deadline that's been self-imposed with no larger or more public repercussions to it, it's very easy to hand wave away that deadline. Yeah. And this happens every time I set deadlines for me working out, Brad. It's like, well, there's no one else that I'm accountable to here for. And so, you know what? Tuesday was a busy day. I wasn't able to do it. So we'll start again on Wednesday. But I have found when I have a sort of public deadline, like Drive will appear on Thursday. You will see Drive on Thursday.
Yes.
Sickness in the family, traveling, business stuff comes up. I got to get that Drive done by Thursday. And so, yes, I will agree with you that deadline, with my personal caveat of it's got to have a public accountability aspect to that deadline. Yeah. That's the best way to do it. I will say this too, though, Brad, my reaction to procrastination at its best, when I know that procrastination is going to happen, like it's most evident, I think, perhaps in taxes. When I have to get all my taxes stuff done.
God, yes.
I mean, I'm not bad about it, and I don't necessarily hate paying taxes. I believe in the idea of taxes. It's just I hate the process. It's so laborious for me.
Yes, it is.
And so the way I try to set myself up for success when I have a task that has to be done, but I hate it, is I'll have a list of other tasks that I also have to get done, but I hate. Some of them are in cartooning. Some of them are in home maintenance. Some of them are in, helping this or that out for the family. Yeah. And that way, at least if I'm stepping away from a thing that I hate to do, I'm at least getting something done off my overall list in life. And however, sometimes the social media starts and it doesn't stop for half an hour.
Yeah.
But what other solutions, Brad? Anything else that comes to mind for you?
Oh, well, I was going to chime in on taxes. So every year at the beginning of the year, we do a pro tips and I say, hey, do your monthly profit loss statements every month. It's the way a professional handles their business. You need to do it. Get that done. Don't be a schmuck. And every year I make it till February. Because I'm a schmuck. And this year I made it all the way to June, and I got knocked off because of moving to the new studio. But I am desperate to catch back up, so I make it all the way through so I can report at the end of the year. And I guess this is my public accountability. I want to be able to report at the end of the year that I kept up with my P&Ls all month. But I do like. I got to tell you, we've got a Comic Lab backer named JC. JC Knight does Not Safe for Work comic, and he does something I am so impressed with. I wish I could do it myself, although I still need just a little bit of wiggle room. But what he does, and I think this is a public accountability thing too, and if you can do this, man, I have such respect for you. At the beginning of the month on Patreon, he posts a calendar of everything that's coming up that coming month.
Oh.
When it's going to, I know, when it's going to post, what it's going to be, boom, boom, 30 days, boom, boom, boom. Now listen, for all I know, he screws up every once in a while. I don't know, because I don't check the guy, but the fact that he does that, it is so impressive to me. And so I'm going to throw that out as an extra added bonus. It doesn't, maybe it's just the week ahead. Here's what's coming for the week ahead, or something like that, right? That's still, but I do like this idea of public accountability where you say, I'm going to do this. And then it becomes your pride. If you don't do it, now you got to explain why. That's going to make it a lot more difficult for you to procrastinate and get your butt in gear than if you don't have any kind of accountability.
Yeah. I will say one thing and I've talked about this on the show, so I won't bore everybody with it too long, but I created a system on the wall of my studio that has a bunch of repeated tasks that I have to do every week. And I've created them into little magnetic tiles that are on a magnetic dry erase board, right? Mm-hmm. And I have the dry erase board divided up into 7 days. And so what happens is, I know on a Monday, I always have these 6 tasks to do on a Monday, right? Every Monday I have to do those 6 tasks. And I put a little magnetic pin on top of it when it's done. If it doesn't get done, it moves to the next day. But long story short, what happens is by the end of the week, there's an accountability to myself, because if I haven't done the tasks that have been moved over every day, the board has to clear by the end of the week. So on Saturday and Sunday, I've got to get them done if I didn't get them done by Friday. And so that's been my personal way to get accountability in my life, is to myself. That board tells me, no, listen, there's no escaping this. You have to do these 40 things every week. Here are the 5 of those 40 things you have to do today. Get them done.
Absolutely. And then you've got to hold your own feet to the fire. You can't let yourself off the hook, right? Like Dave says, if I don't get those done by Friday, that's going to go into my weekend. Yeah. And it's that type of thing that's going to get you through.
But also, I think it's helpful to have a rule for yourself that you're not allowed to be perfect. Because everyone we know, our brains need to have a moment of blanking out. I don't know if it's a different synaptic state, however you want to describe it. You need to let them refresh, basically, by not pushing. Because one of the worst kind of persons I've ever met is, I don't know if, Brad, if you ever encountered them, like, I've got my day entirely gridded out. I know every 5 minutes are accounted for. From 12:55 to 1 o'clock, I'm finishing my coffee. From 1 o'clock to 1:03, I'm making love to my wife. From 1:04 to 1, like everything is gridded out. And you're like, where is the room for joy and existence? And like, in that respect, the French have it right. You have to allow for a certain amount of downtime for your life too, So a rule that I think is helpful is you're not allowed to be perfect. You know what I mean? Allow yourself to have procrastination. The brain needs it. You need it. Your soul needs it. It's good for you. And frankly, sometimes it's good for creativity, the random thoughts that can happen while procrastinating. So you're not, my advice in this moment is you're not allowed to be perfect.
Yeah. So to sum it up, the Comic Lab advice: hold your feet to the fire. Don't let yourself off the hook, but you're allowed to be imperfect.
Yes.
Yeah, and you know what? It sounds ridiculous, but I'm not being facetious. That is the advice.
Yeah.
You've got to do both.
Yeah, you do have to do both, because you've got to set standards for yourself. You've got to have accountability for the standards you have to set. But then you have to be kind to yourself, because I have that 40 list of things that I have to do every week. On 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, I fail every week. Every week I fail. And so I've got to be kind to myself, or else it just becomes a spiral of negative talk about myself to myself. You know what I mean? And that helps no one. So allow yourself to be imperfect, because it is part of the human existence to have that imperfection.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So, Brad, longtime listeners of the show will know that we are big proponents of self-publishing. And in fact, in recent shows, we had a whole discussion breaking down the lack of benefits of going the publishing route. In fact, it was a ProTips. We had a 30-minute ProTips for those of Patreon subscribers, breaking down what is essentially the new quarter by quarter by quarter by quarter payouts for an advance, quote unquote, on a book. And what that means in terms of workload and how that works for the average person that's doing traditional publishing. And we talked about how Brad's long-held contention that publishing is now the egotistical route and self-publishing is now the logical route, because publishing is wanting to get the burnishing brass glow of having a publisher.
Yeah, it's like publishing has become vanity press, and what we used to call vanity press, which is self-publishing, has become where the real publishing is being done in terms of the publishing that allows you to do something that becomes financially sustainable over a long period of time.
And so the caveat we've always had to that is that we would hold out that children's publishing and YA publishing, we would acknowledge that you still want to go with a publisher. I mean, if you can get with a Scholastic for a YA book, there's nothing you're going to do as a self-publisher that's going to reach an 11, 12, 13-year-old as well as what Scholastic can do. Frankly, because a lot of parents want that pre-vetted stuff, myself included.
Yes, they do.
You don't want to have to triple check every book that you get for your child. You want to know that some other adult in the room has looked at it. And also, there's just ways and means of getting to children through Scholastic book fairs and the like that you cannot do. So we've always acknowledged that if you're going to go to children, if you're going to go to YA novels, et cetera, that you'll still want to go to publisher. But I wanted to bring in one more thought today, Brad, one more caveat to our long-held advice, and say that if you are the type of cartoonist that thinks you're going to do one book and be out, just a one and done, I think there is an argument to be made that that person might want to go with a publisher. Because they're not and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think they're not building something bigger. They don't necessarily want to build all the infrastructure to sell that book in terms of a Shopify site and a Comic-Con appearances and book signings and all this sort of stuff. If it's just one book, if you like, and so I know this is a random thought, but do you think there's an argument to be made that if you're going to do a one and done cartooning career, do you do it with a publisher?
So I want to make sure I understand correctly. This person is going to publish one book only over the course of their entire life. They're just going to put out, there's only going to be one book with their name on it.
That was my thinking for this caveat. Yeah.
Okay. If that person exists, I agree with you. But what percentage of cartoonists do you think that this applies to?
Well, I don't know. Probably a very small amount. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
I'm immediately picking up on what you're saying is like, who the hell am I talking to on this? Is that your thought?
Yeah. I mean, when you first pitched me this topic, I thought you were going to say, for example, fables to me would be technically an example of kind of a one and done because it's the only fables book I ever printed. I'm not going to do fables anymore. And I'm going to do Evil Inc. I'm going to do all this other stuff. But Fables was just like a standalone thing that I'm never likely to come back to, even though you always say never. So I was prepared to approach this in terms of that. But in terms of like, you just have one book that you're going to do and then you're never going to do another book. Yeah, I guess you might as well do a publisher for that because you literally can't hurt yourself.
I have to say, as a friend, I want to share this with everybody because I can read Brad's face where literally your advice was like, I could see it on your face. You're like, yeah, I mean, in Dave's dumbass, weird hypothetical where one person is making one book. And like, I could see that on your face as you were trying to answer diplomatically. You could be like, yeah, in this stupid ass hypothetical that will never happen.
I wanted to make sure I understood what you were talking about, but yeah, I guess I would have to agree with you if you're only going to do one book. But I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure that applies to a whole lot of people.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, now let me modify the question just because we're on the topic.
Yeah.
You had the Fables, which was a Philadelphia-focused. It was spelled with a PH for those not familiar. The idea of it being Philadelphia Fables. It was called Fables. PH. And the idea that you would have done this one very specific book, do you think that would be good for a publisher? Now, since you had broached that as an idea.
See, now, this is the argument I was prepared to have, and it's still no.
Okay.
I still would not have taken that to a publisher. Because I still like having that in my library.
Yeah.
I like having that as an add-on for Kickstarters. I like having the ability to go back to it and build from it and so forth. I like the idea of building an entire library of my own stuff that then I can use any way I want to. If I ever wanted to do a 25th anniversary book, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, the chances of my doing that are slim to none.
Right.
But if I wanted to, or if I wanted to do something later on in life, and put a bunch of fables into that as an example of the different stuff that I've done over the years. I've got that ability, right? I can always go back and repackage that, slice it, dice it any number of ways, and it's mine to do that with. And I like having that as part of my overall library. So here's the only time that I think that I would go with a publisher outside of children's and young adult publishing. And that is if I've got something that's selling so many, the volume is so big that I literally can't send it out myself. If it's starting to become an impedance on my ability to get new work done, right? That's the time to sign with a publisher and to say, you take it from here. Right. Yeah. We've got this thing. It's clearly going to be, in the terms of tens of thousands. I don't have this warehouse space for that. I don't have the ability to ship that many. Then you go with a publisher.
Right.
But let's be honest, the chances of that happening to me are slim to none as well. So I think there are outside of young adult, there's very few times other than those outlier instances when I'm very comfortable giving advice to sign with a publisher.
Yeah, it's funny that I like the idea that your slice out, your carve out would be like, it's so successful that you can't handle it. May we all have that problem. Boy, I would love that problem. So yes, I would agree in that situation, go with the publisher. Well, let me jump us into our next question, Brad. This comes on over at patreon.com/comiclab from Andy. And Andy writes, Dave and Brad, I see some creators I like using TinyView. Do you have any thoughts on this platform? So, Brad, any thoughts for Andy on TinyView, the somewhat newish platform? Do you want to tell people what it is?
Well, okay, so I checked this out over the weekend, and I'm going to tell you my impression of it because I was not able to find where I could sign up to be a submitter of comics. I wasn't able to find a terms of service, so I'm just garnering what I could find looking at the surface. So you'll have to take this with a grain of salt. And I don't want to necessarily denigrate TinyView specifically, but I think I see what they're doing, and it's something that, for me, I'm not comfortable with. So I'm not going to say that I wouldn't sign with TinyView, but I am going to say I wouldn't sign with a comics platform that's doing the thing that I'm about to explain to you. Okay. All right. So in a way, so I can be fair to TinyView in case I'm getting some of this wrong based on what I saw. Because like I said, I don't want to give them any shade if I don't have to. But here's what it looked like to me. It looked like a place that you could go and subscribe to comics that would get delivered to your app. And a subscription costs a certain amount of money, like I think it was $5. Okay. And then when you have a subscription, you can see the comics that are carried by that platform. And of course, you can choose the ones that you see. And if you don't want to see certain ones, you don't choose them. And so at the very heart of it, a platform that would have this kind of payment structure is basically something that, Dave, you and I saw 20 years ago. It was called Modern Tales.
It was, yes.
And it was back in the days of KeenSpot, and it was way before micro payments were popular. It was way ahead of its time. Okay. But it failed for a similar reason that I would not feel comfortable signing with the comics platform that had this kind of a payment system. And that's this. Okay. That $5 subscription, all of it goes into a pot, right? It goes into a central holding location. The platform owner is going to take a certain cut off the top for themselves. Then they've got to distribute the rest of the money to the rest of the people in the platform, right? And of course, most likely, the way they're going to split that up is based on page views. If I delivered 100,000 page views, I get a much bigger cut than the person that delivered 10 page views. Right. So then that money gets distributed based on that. Again, not saying that that's what TinyView is doing, but this is what it looks like to me. So I'm not a big fan of that. Number one, because I've never been the guy that delivered 100,000 page views. I was always closer to the person that delivered 10, right? So I know that money is, by and large, is not going to come to me. And that's going to really irk me, because some of those $5 subscriptions were the result of people that came directly to see me. Right. And so if I would have directed them to Patreon, I would have gotten the full $5 out of them.
I see.
Instead, I directed them to this other platform, and now I'm getting a small piece of what would have been a much bigger chunk, right? I'm getting a small piece. Now, the other side of this argument is, and this is how this game gets played. I've seen it a lot of times. The other side of this is, hey, but Brad, if you sign on this platform, you're going to get all of these comics readers that you wouldn't have had otherwise, right? People are going to sign up, and I'll just make up a name, the 800-pound gorilla comic, right? 800-pound gorilla. They're going to come to see the 800-pound gorilla comic, and some of them are going to find you. And there's not enough of that to happen, because number one, it also happens the other way too. Some of my people are going to discover the gorilla comic, right? So the problem with this is the gorilla comic is going to be at the top of that platform every day, because that's the way the platform has to operate. It's no good to their users if they put up a comic that nobody necessarily likes. They've got to play the odds and stack the deck with as many popular comics as they can at the top. That makes it good for the user. That means that my comic might not be there every day. In fact, it might not be there, but a percentage of a day here and there. I might get 5 days during the month for a percentage of the time. You see what I'm saying? I'm going to get a very spotty coverage on that. So I'm lending my efforts to create something that I'm getting very little back from. And I don't believe that I'm going to get a whole bunch of comics readers because they came for the 800-pound gorilla. They ain't looking for me. They're happy with the 800-pound gorilla. They might go out looking, but let's face it, mainly they're going to get this app and they're going to click on the ones that they're familiar with because they've seen them on social media. They're not going to find me. Meanwhile, I'm doing just great building my own audience and controlling everything that I have by not throwing in with a platform like this because it doesn't benefit me. Now, if I was the 800-pound gorilla, I'm signing in a minute because I know I'm going to dominate there and I'm going to get lots of money back. It's no big deal, right? But I've never been that cartoonist. I've never been that person. I've got to be a lot more careful with my business. And that means I'm going to use a place like Patreon, where if somebody actually does think enough of me to become a subscriber, I keep 100% of that money.
Yeah. And I can hear people saying when they're listening to Brad on this, they're like, well, Brad and Dave, you for free syndicate your comic on Blue Sky, on Mastodon, on Twitter, on Threads, on Instagram, right? All the stuff. And that's true. Yes, we do put it all there. But if you notice, what we always try to do is, number one, we try to guide them towards our website and our newsletters, so where we can permanently retain, better communicate with a core part of that audience. But then what we always do is we try to drive them from those syndicated, for lack of a better phrase, locations to a location where we can monetize them directly, whether it's Patreon, Kickstarter, or our store websites, right? We try to avoid sending them to a third party in anything we do for them to monetize, and we get a slice from that company.
Right.
So both Patreon and Kickstarter, whatever their faults, transparency is not one of them. Like you have a full sense of this is how much money's coming in. These are the fees involved. Here you go. Here's your money at the end of the month. You know, I would find, and you might say, well, Dave, what's different about TinyView than about Patreon or Kickstarter? One might be, and I haven't seen it yet, so maybe there is a transparency portal for creators, but publicly, at least, it doesn't show how much the average person is making from how many views they're getting on TinyView publicly. Right. So what I'm saying is maybe once you've signed the contract, maybe you're given a portal access to full transparency there. But I think that would benefit everybody involved. Like, our creators are making X amount of money, and here's how much they're each making every month by using their comics on TinyView. My spidey sense is, for people that are my level of cartooning audience, it's going to be $10, $50, $75, you know, nothing to write home about. And in the meantime, that audience is not mine to own and control. It's TinyView's audience to own and control, you know?
Yeah, when we talk about owning and controlling your own work, this is where those words become really popular. We hear people repeat those words back to us all the time, right? Own and control your own work, and it's deceptive at how easy it is to lose track of what that actually means. Yes. Patreon, absolutely, that's owning and controlling your own work. Even though it's a third party, it's a direct from them to you, right? With your audience, they're the intermediary. Kickstarter, absolutely owning and controlling your own work. Posting on a platform like this, you not so much because you don't have that ability to truly direct traffic when it comes to the person that is bona fide your fan. They came there for you. This becomes very, very simple. Ask yourself, which is the better financial deal? You're doing a comic. That person, you find one person that becomes enamored with your work, right? And that's a wonderful moment when you find that one person that really gets what you're doing and appreciates it. They are ready to give you money. What's the better financial deal for you? Is it if they become a Patreon backer, or if they become a supporter through this other platform that might be set up similar to the way that we just got done lining up? All right. Which is better? Patreon's better every day. Yeah.
And, you know, all of this sounds like I'm poo-pooing TinyView. I actually am not necessarily. It's, if you want to do it, my advice would be, sure, go for it. But I think you will be, I have nothing to base this on. I think based on 25 years online, I think you will be underwhelmed with the amount that you get from it is my bottom line. Mm-hmm. I'd be happy to be wrong. I will, honest to God, be happy to be proved wrong if you sign up for it. But so to answer the question directly, do I hate the idea? Do I think it's an evil? No. I get this business model. I think it's a perfectly fine business model. I don't necessarily endorse it for me or for you, but if you want to do it, I think I'm fine with that.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to grind my teeth if you do, and if you do it under this reasoning, and we've talked about this before. Tell me if this sounds familiar.
Oh God, yeah.
Well, I'm only making $2, but that's $2 I didn't have. If you're making this under the idea of that's $2 I didn't have, that's the kind of business decision that's going to lead you down the wrong path every freaking time. You're going to waste your time. You're going to waste your money. Yes, it is $2 you didn't have, but you're spending so much in terms of time, effort, money, attention. To get that $2, you're actually spending the equivalent of 10 to get that too. The that's $2 I didn't have argument is a really, really bad business decision. Right. So whatever you do, don't make it because of that, because I'll give you the side eye all day long.
Right. That's basically you're missing an opportunity cost in having put your time, energy, and comics onto TinyView versus really pushing the better opportunity of putting them on Patreon. So what Brad's saying, what his intuition is right there. You're basically, it's $2 you didn't have, but it's also $40 you could have had over at Patreon, or $400 you could have had, because the opportunity cost is invisible to you in the time of doing it, unless you see that had you put the last 2, 3, 4 years towards Patreon versus something like TinyView, you would be making more money. But anyway,
building your own audience on your own terms, right? If you're doing this, you're building an audience someplace else. You really can't control. Think of it in the worst case scenario. All of a sudden, something happens. TinyView goes bankrupt, or they kick you off for some reason, or they change. There any number of reasons where you get cut off from there. You don't have that audience anymore. Right. Why? Right. Because you didn't own it and control it. It's a third party thing. And I know we all say, well, Brad, that doesn't happen. You're being an alarmist. Take a look at what's happening right now. I just saw something come around last week that said Twitter is scrubbing tweets that are older than a certain point, right? Because they just don't want to carry them anymore to cut down server costs, something that none of us ever thought was ever going to happen. And it's happening, and not only that, but okay, it's for you and me, Dave. Who cares? Somebody can't see a post I made from 2012. Nobody cares. But if you're a news organization or historical organization or someplace that has been using Twitter all of this time to as a publishing arm, that's a big loss. Okay, so saying that this stuff never happens is ridiculous. We look around, it's happening all the time, right? We warned about this with ebooks, DRM protected ebooks, saying, well, yeah, what happens when that ebook distributor goes belly up? Well, that's never going to happen. How many times has it happened in the last 10 years? Yeah. Several. And then those ebooks are gone, right? Because you never really owned them, which is why Dave and I always sell our ebooks DRM free, digital rights management free. You bought it, you got it. Right. That's what we're trying to say here. Just be very careful. If you're going to do it, go in with your eyes open. I'm with Dave. I think I'll tell you right now, I think you're going to be underwhelmed. But at the end of the day, you got to make that decision.
Yeah. And what's funny is whenever we get a question like this one that was literally a one-line question, Brad, and then we go off on it for like 10 minutes, I always wonder if the person on the other end is like, geez, all right, God, you answered it in minute 1. I get it. Good Lord. I asked you a one-sentence question.
Well, how crappy would it have been if we would have just said, no, we don't like it. Next.
Yeah. I know.
There are real reasons. But listen, Dave, while we've got a little bit of time, I've got a question I wanted to bounce off of you really quick. You ready for this? This one comes in from Jay, and he says, in all caps, I have an addiction to drawing. Here's the thing. Any chance that I get, I will have my eyes glued to my iPad screen, drawing for hours until I basically have to force myself to go to bed. Lately, I've been noticing my eyesight getting worse. I'd have periods of time where my vision gets all fuzzy and blurry, and I'd go outside, stare at the sky, and notice that there's a ton of floaters in my vision, which weren't there 10 years ago. The problem is, I just can't stop drawing. Despite the negative effects it has given me, when I'm away from my iPad for more than a day, it sends me into what I can only describe as a depressive episode. I really love what I do, and I never want to stop. So my question to you both is, how the heck can I enjoy drawing in a healthy way without completely blinding myself? Dave, what advice are we going to give this person here?
So I have what I think this can come from both Brad and I. Without even checking with Brad, I think I can speak for both of us. And our advice here is get thee to a doctor. That's what I think my advice is on this, is that Brad and I have no grounds to tell you what your eye health is, especially if you're seeing floaters. Which I mean, I know I get the basic idea of what causes floaters and what they're doing and what's happening in your eye. I understand it, but you should not be taking medical advice from us.
Right.
And this is serious enough where if your addiction is in any way contributing to it, and I'm not sure that it is, by the way, you want to nip this in the bud before the effect ruins the cause, i.e. you can no longer draw at all because you cannot see or stare at a screen for very long. So I think this is something to not sit on. I think you should make an appointment this week as soon as you can to go see an eye doctor and get this professionally looked at. Obviously, tell them the conditions that you think it might arise in. But from what I understand, as far as floaters, again, not a doctor, I think it might not necessarily be related to your activities. It might be genetic in terms of, or the structure of your own eye causing this problem. So Brad, any other additional thoughts to that?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I mean, number one, the headline is listen to a doctor, not a couple of screw ups like us. We can't give you any health advice. But I will say this. I read your question a couple times, Jay, and you've got like a black and white kind of viewpoint on this, right? You're saying, well, I draw, and when I do, I draw all day. I draw and I draw and I draw, and I got to force myself to stop drawing so I can go to sleep. I just draw. But when I don't touch my iPad all day, I get depressed, in using your terminology. Right. You went from 100% to 0%. And you don't seem to realize that there's a whole bunch of percentages in between that. You can draw for an hour and then take a break, Jay. Okay? You don't have to draw all day. And then after that break, you can come back and draw some more, right? This does not have to be an all or nothing thing, right? I would absolutely suggest, Dave, you got one of those timers. What's that called? The
Italian term for them is called Pomodoro, Pomodoro timers. And they're but it's basically any kind of kitchen timer. Mine happens to be a visual one that as you crank it, you see a dark blue across the numbers, if that makes sense, around the circle, radiating out from the center. But the idea is, any kitchen timer will give you a 15-minute thing, like just work for 15 minutes. Ring, ring, ring. Yes. Okay, take a break. Stretch, because that's also something we all have to do. Give your eyes something to look at in middle distance, because you've been looking at something up close, and in your case, a screen. So you want to do some middle distance. And by the way, the thing that solves both of those perfectly in terms of stretching and moving your body, get your circulation going, and looking at the middle distance, is a quick walk around the block. No matter where you live, a quick walk around the block is the perfect thing for a 15, 20-minute break from your drawing, because it solves all three of those. So that's what I use, Brad. How about you? What do you do?
Yeah, I do the same thing. And also, I find that, here's the deal. Like, I part of me, I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. Part of me says it's the iPad, right? He's got that iPad right up to his face, because it's this small little screen. Which is, by the way, I don't like drawing on an iPad. It's too small for me. I use a Cintiq. What is that? A 21 inch, a 24 inch. I got a big honking Cintiq over there, because that allows me to sit up at my table and get my nose off of the glass and draw. part of me wonders if they're not holding that darn iPad because it's so small right up next to their face. Right.
Yeah.
And I want to, part of me wants to point that out. Part of me says that now we're giving medical advice and really we ought to go back to the part where we told Jay to go see an ophthalmologist.
Yeah,
I don't know which one is right.
Definitely go see an ophthalmologist because from what I understand about floaters, listen, again, I'm not giving medical advice. It might be for very unrelated reasons, either trauma to the eye or something genetic in terms of, it doesn't necessarily relate to continuous eye strain, although it could. So what I'm saying is go see an ophthalmologist because Brad and I are not. But the thing is, you don't want to mess with your eyes. The key things you don't want to mess with as a cartoonist, you don't want to mess with your hand and your arm and your shoulder, and you don't want to mess with your eyes. That's basically like I could lose both my legs and still be a great cartoonist, you know? You could cut off my nose, still be a great cartoonist. So, but you don't want to mess with my eyes and you don't want to mess with my hand.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's just the one hand. Old Lefty always gets the shitty jobs. Honest to God, Brad, I was doing some chainsaw stuff and I switched around the other day when I was prepping for the hurricane. I was cutting down some branches in the backyard. I switched. I'm like, nope, I'm cutting this way. I changed my entire posture because I was like, if this saw gets loose, I want my left hand to take the brunt. I don't want my right hand to take the brunt, you know?
How many times have we made those kind of decisions? It's like, if something's going to happen, it's happening to my left hand.
Yeah.
I don't care what's going to go on next.
Yeah,
you know?
Old Lefty got the shitty draw in life because whenever I have to go down the drain disposal, you know, the little grinder of death down there.
The garbage disposal.
Yeah, Old Lefty has to go hunting down there, even with the power off. Old Lefty's going in, not Old Righty.
I turned that thing on and my hand was down there. I was trying to get something
that's my worst
out of
fear.
it.
Don't say that out loud.
I was trying to get something out. Oh, it hurt like hell. But I was so upset that there was something down there and I was trying to get it unjammed and I turned that sucker on and it was my right hand. Had my hand down there and I'm like, Jesus Christ, turned it back on.
Wait a minute, what is the series of events? Did you not kill the power before you did it?
Oh, no, I had to keep the power on because I would try to loosen it. Then I turn the power on to see if I could get it to loosen, you know?
So why did you have why was your hand down there?
It was a dime that had gotten stuck down there, and I was trying to get it out with it. And if you get a coin down there, I'll flip over all the cards. You get a coin stuck down there, call a plumber. You're getting a new garbage disposal. You're not getting that thing out. But I hadn't learned that yet. I had my hand down there trying to get it out, and I was so angry, upset, and I had been doing it for a while. You know, try it
so
and then turn it on.
Try it. You were frustrated. Yeah.
No, and I turned that thing on. My hand was down there, and it spun around and hurt like a son of a gun.
Well, I want to thank you and your right hand for making a guest appearance in tonight's Nightmare. Dave Kellett's Nightmare tonight will be about Brad's right hand going into a garbage disposal. That's great. Thank you, Brad.
Well, listen, we should keep the focus on eyes. If you'll pardon the pun, focusing on eyes, because there's something I actually have right here that I need to read, and I got to be able to focus to do it. Let's see if I can read this little chart here that says the following. You have been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
And the eyes have it. Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, who everybody can see is the nicest guy around. He's the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comics Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the apple of our eye, Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
And if it is your view that you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. Also, don't forget to keep giving us those reviews on Spotify. You're keeping us right there at the top.
Brad, I see what you did there. Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/ for God's sakes, call your ophthalmologist.
You know, Dave, remembering the stories of the ice cream truck back in the day when our kids were small and we were all struggling right? We're trying to do our best to make ends meet. Friends of ours that had kids the same age were kind of in that same position where they just didn't have the extra money for the ice cream truck. And so they told their kids, who were toddlers at this point, that was the truck, that the job of that truck was to play music in the neighborhood every day. And so when the ice cream truck came by, the kids all came up and got really excited, but not because of the ice cream, but because the music truck was here, and they got to dance in the living room to the music truck. The music truck is here. The music truck is here. It wasn't until years later they had company over. Might have been my kids, come to think of it. Anyway, they had company over, and one of the kids from outside pointed out that truck had ice cream on it, and these kids didn't talk to their mother for like a day and a half. Because all this time there was ice cream there and they didn't know it. The jig was up.
Can I tell you what's so sweet is how dumb those kids were?